There are moments when life feels like a path without direction. Maybe you have felt this way before. Maybe you are feeling this way right now. Restless questions fill your heart, like echoes that won't go away. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Does God really have a plan for me? Or am I all alone in this? This emptiness, this feeling of being lost, can be overwhelming. It's like being in an endless desert, where the suffocating heat of doubt and the weight of loneliness seem to consume you. You look around and see nothing but uncertainty. If this is your reality today, I want you to know, you are not alone. This feeling of helplessness, this internal struggle, has been experienced by some of the greatest heroes of faith. People who, just like you, questioned, cried, and felt the weight of waiting. The difference? They didn't know it yet, but God was already writing something extraordinary into their stories. Remember Joseph. Betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and as if that weren't enough, unjustly imprisoned. Imagine what he must have thought, night after night, in that cold, damp prison. Why, God? What did I do to deserve this? Have you forgotten me? Every tear Joseph shed seemed meaningless. Each day felt like a repeat of the one before, no hope, no answers. Maybe you feel like that today. Maybe someone close to you has betrayed you, leaving deep wounds in your heart. People who should have supported you ended up hurting you. Perhaps, like Joseph, you find yourself in a situation that feels unfair, a job where your efforts go unrecognized, a family that doesn't understand your pain, a life that feels stuck. You pray, you ask for answers, but all you find is silence. The nights feel long, and hope seems to fade little by little. What Joseph didn't know, and maybe you don't realize yet, is that God was shaping his character, preparing him for something far greater than he could have imagined. Every tear he shed was not in vain, every painful moment was being transformed into strength. At the right time, Joseph was brought out of that prison to take on the most important position in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. That young man who was once rejected became an instrument of salvation for an entire nation. Just like Joseph, your pain is not the end. You may not understand it now, but God is working in the silence. He is preparing you for something you can't yet see. That betrayal that seemed to destroy your dreams, that failure that crushed your expectations, God is using all of it to strengthen you. Believe this, Joseph's story teaches us that when we trust in God, even the darkest moments can lead us to a greater purpose. What seemed like the end was actually the beginning of something extraordinary. And the same God who raised Joseph is with you, writing a story of redemption, transformation, and victory. Trust, persevere, and wait, because your breakthrough will come at the right time. And Moses? He fled to the desert after committing a terrible mistake. Burdened by guilt and regret, he believed his life was over, that his purpose had been destroyed by his own failure. Imagine how he felt wandering through the desert, day after day, tending sheep, a prince of Egypt reduced to a simple shepherd. The echo of his wrong decisions followed him, and perhaps he thought, I've ruined everything. God can't use me anymore. Maybe you feel like that today. Perhaps a mistake from your past haunts you, making you believe that you can never be restored. You look back and see wrong choices, missed opportunities, broken relationships. Guilt binds you like invisible chains, whispering that there's no more hope, that your time has passed, and that God has already found someone else to fulfill the purpose that once could have been yours. You feel like you're merely existing, living a life far smaller than the one you once dreamed of. But Moses' story shows us something powerful. God never gives up on us. Even when we think we've failed beyond repair, he still sees us as valuable instruments for his plan. In the desert, where Moses saw only solitude and routine, God saw preparation. While Moses was tending sheep, God was teaching him patience, leadership, and humility, qualities he would need to lead an entire nation to freedom. It was in the desert, in the midst of his apparent insignificance, that Moses had an encounter with God at the burning bush. And in that moment, God showed him that his past did not define him but instead prepared him for something greater. The same God who saw beyond Moses' fear and failures chose him to deliver Israel from slavery. And just as God did with Moses, he can do with you. Your mistakes do not cancel God's plans for your life. What you thought was your greatest failure can become the foundation of your mission. God turns the deserts in our lives into classrooms where he molds us for something extraordinary. So, don't give up. The God who called Moses is still calling you. He sees beyond your mistakes, beyond your doubts and fears. The desert that seems like the end may actually be the beginning of a new journey with God. Trust him, for he has never forgotten you. Esther, oh, Esther. A young Jewish woman, orphaned, taken to live in a strange palace, surrounded by rigid rules, judging eyes, and a culture that wasn't her own. For a long time, she must have felt lost, insecure, maybe even unworthy of being there. She lived hiding her true identity, afraid of being discovered, fearing that the truth could cost her life. Perhaps, on silent nights, Esther asked herself, "Why am I here? What's the purpose of all this? Does my life even have meaning, or am I just a pawn in a game too big for me to understand?" Maybe you feel the same way. Maybe you're in a place where you don't feel like you belong, surrounded by pressures that suffocate you, afraid to be who you truly are. Perhaps you're going through a season of uncertainty, where everything feels meaningless, without purpose. Doubts might be shouting inside you, "Am I enough? Why did God put me here? What am I doing with my life?" The fear of not meeting expectations, of failing, or even being rejected by those around you might be paralyzing you. But then came the decisive moment for Esther. Her people were about to be destroyed, and her uncle Mordecai brought her a message that would echo in her soul forever. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Esther 4 verse 14. In that moment, everything made sense. Esther realized that her position, as unexpected as it was not a coincidence. God had orchestrated every detail of her life, from her childhood as an orphan to her coronation as Queen of Persia. He had been preparing her for a crucial moment, where her courage and faith would be the key to saving an entire nation. Just like Esther, perhaps you are exactly where you need to be, even if you don't understand it now. Perhaps God has placed you in your family, your job, your city, not by chance, but because he has a greater purpose that is yet to be revealed. What feels confusing today may be the key to a great mission tomorrow. God wastes nothing, and he is working silently behind the scenes of your life. You may feel afraid, insecure, or think that you're not strong enough. But remember, God chooses ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. Just like Esther, he equips you, strengthens you, and places you in the right place at the right time. So, take heart. This may be your time. Trust that God has positioned you exactly where you need to be to fulfill a purpose greater than you can imagine. Now, look at your own life. How many times have you wondered why you're going through so much pain? Why, no matter how hard you try, things don't seem to change. The silence hurts, the wounds seem to stay open, and you ask yourself, "God, where are you? Why is this happening to me?" Maybe you're facing betrayals, just like Joseph. People you trusted turned against you, and now you feel alone, wronged, unsure of who you can trust. Your heart aches, and every memory feels like an invisible chain weighing you down. Or maybe you feel like Moses, trapped by regret, believing that your past mistakes define who you are today. You look at yourself and see failures, missed opportunities, closed doors. It's as if a voice inside you whispers, "You are no longer capable. God can't use you anymore." Or perhaps you are experiencing something similar to Esther, feeling out of place, in a situation where everything seems unfamiliar, and you don't understand why you are there. You look around and ask yourself, why am I here? What is my role? Do I really make a difference? But I want you to pay attention to this powerful truth. God's silence does not mean His absence. He has not forgotten you. He has not finished your story. Do you know that moment when you feel like you can't take it anymore? When the weight of life feels overwhelming and you can't see a way out? That's exactly when God begins to work. When your strength runs out, His strength takes over. When you think you're alone, He is closer than ever. God is shaping you, strengthening you, preparing your heart for something much greater than you can imagine. Every tear you have shed has been seen by Him. Nothing you've been through has been in vain. Remember His promise in Jeremiah 29 verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. Can you imagine that? The Creator of the universe, the God who shaped the stars, knows every detail of your life. Even before you were born, He had already written the days of your journey. He is in control, even when you can't see it. So, if today you feel lost, without direction, without answers, I want to encourage you, surrender your fears to God. Open your heart to Him, even if it's through tears. Speak to Him, even if your voice is weak and weary. Because He listens. He sees. And He moves. He guided Joseph from prison to the palace. He transformed Moses, from a fugitive to a deliverer. He raised Esther, from an unknown orphan to the queen of a nation. And He can do the same for you. You are not alone. You have never been alone. So, I ask you, are you willing to trust, even when you can't see the next step? Are you willing to believe that God is still writing your story? He has something extraordinary prepared for you. And maybe, just maybe, this is your time. If this video touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with everyone who might need these words. You never know who may be in need of a message of hope today. Together, we can spread God's word even further.